residential tech talk, vendor, lighting specialist, art residential tech.
Welcome to Residential Tech Talks. I'm Jeremy Glowacki, Executive Editor of Residential Tech Today. On this week's podcast, Richard Litofsky joins us from Rockville, Maryland, where he is co-founder and CEO of MadVR Labs, the developer of the MV Extreme and MV Pro video processors for high-end home cinema. Rick is a serial entrepreneur with an expertise and focus on several technology categories, including, of course, real-time video processing, which we will dive into today. After witnessing at CEDIA EXPO 2023, one of the most impressive home theater demos I've ever seen and heard, featuring MadVR technology, video processing, I knew it was only a matter of time before it became a topic of conversation here on the podcast. Rick Litofsky, welcome to Residential Tech Talks. Thanks for joining us today.
Oh, my pleasure, Jeremy. Thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
You bet. And, we're recording this on February 21st, which is not too far removed from your trip to Barcelona for the ISE show. Are you fully recovered physically from that trip?
Yeah, it was. These trips are kind of always, quite exciting and a lot of adrenaline going on. And then, afterwards, there's usually quite a recovery period. It's kind of funny anytime we walk out of one of these shows, like one of the major shows like CEDIA or ISE, you can actually just feel as you literally leave, the hall for the last time of the show. And it's almost like a bit of like a postpartum, like you just feel the kind of like the adrenaline, the excitement, everything just kind of like, goes away. And then you just kind of have this overwhelming sense of like boredom and longing to get right back into it. But that's kind of like, the world we live in, right?
Yeah, but you also came home with a cough, right? You're kind of hacking away. Like we all pick up something these days too. It's like our immune systems should be getting stronger, but I feel like they've just all been knocked to hell or something.
Yeah, the show was great. We had a great show, and then I stayed in Europe with my wife for a few days, and we went into Madrid and Seville, which were absolutely beautiful. Seville, I consider like the dessert capital of the world, which makes it even that much harder to leave. But just kind of like on the way home on the plane, I was like, and wound up picking up a little bit of bronchitis. But
okay.
I'm glad that we timed this pretty well, so that I'm back in shape to be able to talk and have actual words come out of my mouth now.
Well, great. Hopefully we can hang in there. And every time I mention something, like I said, I had that bit of a cough myself, and it was just every time I thought of it, I started to cough as opposed to actually needing to cough all the time. So we'll stop talking about it. Maybe it won't bother you. I know there are folks that are watching this that are familiar with MadVR, but we'll kind of take it from the standpoint of folks who maybe don't know it so well. And I guess just generally we say it's a video processing technology, but there's a lot of depth to what you can do with it, and it's a very high-end product, obviously. But let me start with the backstory of how you got involved as a co-founder, and start with your co-founder himself, Matthias Rowan, and how you two originally connected.
Yeah, well, Jeremy, to go into that really kind of requires a little bit of a backstory, right? So about 5-6 years ago, I set out to build what my wife likes to call my midlife crisis theater. And everything was meticulously planned. We did thousands of renders. We did everything from the sight lines and the audio and the projector and the furniture, and everything was just meticulously planned out, and everything came out amazing, but the video quality just wasn't there, right? It just left me longing. And I looked around in the market, and there were really no options that interested me. And, being an entrepreneur, I said, there's got to be a way to do this and to improve this picture quality in a way that's really simple and easy for anyone to use, right? Because, the days have gotten behind me of wanting to tinker, right? Like when I finally sit down in my theater and I want to relax, I don't want to be playing with like Windows drivers and trying to get different things going. I just want to hit play and just have things work. And so that kind of led me into researching what was possible. And I came across my partner, Matthias, and I was aware of what he was doing in what we'll call the underground with the MadVR algorithms for things such as upscaling and some tone mapping. And so I approached Matthias and said, hey, hey, why don't we build a business around this? And there's so much that we can do with it and make it just dead simple, right? So that integrators would want to install it and use it, and customers would love it. And he said, hey, it's been a dream of mine to one day be able to commercialize this technology. And we talked about it for a while, and then we formed the company. And here we are about 5 years later now with customers in about 40 countries worldwide.
So backing up just a little bit, how big of a screen are you talking about for your theater that you were looking at when you started?
Yeah, so in my theater, I have 140-inch wide 237 aspect ratio. So what we'll call a scope screen, meaning that it's wider than your typical 16 by 9. And we'll certainly, I'm sure, be talking about scope screens as we move along in the podcast.
Yeah, and so what were you looking at on your screen that you felt was not as high a quality video at the time when you first got your theater up and running? Are you such a stickler that it's something that your average eye wouldn't catch, or what were you kind of seeing?
Yeah, my family was also kind of complaining about the video quality in those early days too, because the HDR was just so dark, right? Like the 1080p Blu-ray looked better than the HDR, right? And so that's the whole promise of HDR, is just high dynamic range and all this extra excitement. And instead it was just like dark and dingy, and you could see some highlights were getting crushed, and blacks were not right, and a lot of details being lost. It had the annoyances of having black bars on the screen, and having to keep changing the lens memory every time the content on the screen, like if I'm in like an Apple TV menu, for example, and then you're watching a scope movie. And so it was a number of things that were all kind of like bottling up, right? That
Yeah,
we
and
set out
so
to
how,
solve.
when you found Matthias, what was his? You said a kind of underground video processing solution. What's that world all about? Because I don't dig deep into that type of space, but you kind of found him through sort of kind of chat boards and stuff like that. He was.
Yeah, right. Like
Mhm.
online forums and message boards. He was making software
Mhm.
available for hobbyists to use on their, like the
Mhm.
home theater PCs, to be able not to do playback, but to be able to do things like upscaling and
Okay.
tone mapping and some of these things, right? So we already had a running head start because he had developed this library that was well regarded even back then as being the best among other alternatives for what it could do. So it was actually part of our game plan, right? Was if we were just starting from scratch with two guys and an idea, it would have taken us years and years and years to get to market. But instead, we were able to leverage that development that he had
Yeah,
done
so
over
he
the
brings
past
this
decade.
technical capability, existing IP, and then you're bringing some of the business aspects to how to get this stuff to market and the best way to approach all the channel
Right.
relationships and everything. So, what was the first what was the first result there when you got a product that was available? What could it do initially?
Yeah, so initially we go over this, the overall features, but it was primarily about managing the screen aspect ratios and the tone mapping, the dynamic tone mapping. That was all the rage back then. And it's still, one of the things that, we're best known for. But the product has continued to evolve in so many areas since then. I mean, it's been
Yeah.
probably 5 years since we first started with
Yeah,
the
so that
prototype.
dynamic aspect ratio is a thing that immediately it resonates with me as a owner of a widescreen, projector with the 235 to 1 aspect ratio, right? So I'm in that world of where you had to adjust manually to get things to work to fit the screen. I didn't throw the extra cash out to get even the automatic lens or anything like that. So I keep
you keep a ladder.
Yeah, I happen to have a
ladder
workbench
hand
back
by.
there. All right, for working out, not like the kind you do, tools on, but like an actual workout bench that I climb up on, which is a little precarious at times. The kids kind of know how to do it, my teenage daughters, but usually they're just like, "Can you come down and fix this? You left it where it's like bleeding off the screen." Yeah, so I get that.
Yeah, right.
So I don't know if you want to take through like how some of these things work a little bit, how it simplifies the process.
Yeah, well, would you want to start kind of like a high level, kind of talk about
Yeah,
what the MV is, what it does, kind of like the hero features,
for
and kind
sure.
of
Yeah,
work
and
our
then there's
way
things
through that?
as terminology maybe doesn't make sense to me. You can ask, I can go deep dive into that a little bit more. But
Yeah, so in summary, the MadVR MV is a video processor that it goes in line with an existing system. So you can put in a new system, or you can add it to an existing system simply by inserting it in front of the display. So if you have a projector, or if you have an LED wall, or a flat panel, the line, whichever is feeding that display, instead will go into the MV, and then you go out of the MV to the display. So the typical thing would be, your sources into an AVR, into the NV,
okay,
into your display, right? And so we just kind of sit in between, and we make the image look better according to your preferences and industry standards as the video travels through. So we're not a playback device, right? So we're not a media source, and you can't play movies from our device, but we clean up the signal as it travels through. And so a great way to know about the features is there's a great mnemonic that we like to use called Music HD. And you can see that along the bottom of the screen. And although the product has absolutely nothing to do with audio, happens to be a mnemonic that works out really well. So I'll kind of touch on some of these key features, and then we'll kind of work through some of them, and kind of do a deeper dive as we go along, if that sounds good. So the M stands for Motion AI. We have created the world's first AI-based motion interpolation in a dedicated video processor. And when we get to that section, I'll go into more about what that is. But essentially, we have come up with a way to smooth motion in such a way where it actually looks good and is not objectionable, like many past algorithms and implementation of motion interpolation. The U stands for upscaling. So we have AI-based upscaling. So as you know, we're still dealing with a lot of 1080p content, right? Like, so all broadcast TV, at least through Comcast, or a lot of these sources, is still 1080p. And a lot of people still have a great 1080p Blu-ray collection that they love, and they enjoy, and they want to keep. So being able to show that at 4K, we have some algorithms that can, in some circumstances, almost make it look identical or nearly identical to 4K. So it's really pretty wild on how that works. So that's what the U is. The S is for subtitle management. That is the ability to put the subtitles back onto the screen as a scope screen user yourself. I'm sure you're familiar with the pains that come along with subtitles in scope movies on a scope screen, where they appear below the masking or above the screen. So as we get a little bit further into the podcast, we'll cover that in detail. The I stands for incredible nonlinear stretch. And what's extra incredible here is that we needed something that started with an I. So we put the I for incredible in there in order to make the mnemonic work perfectly. So nonlinear stretch is the ability to get rid of those pesky black bars that you see, whether you're watching a scope movie on a 16:9 screen and you've got those big bars above and below the screen, or whether you're watching 16:9 content on a scope screen and you've got those big black bars on the left and right of the screen. Being able to get rid of some or all of that in a way that's very pleasing and very difficult, if at all possible, to notice. So we'll spend some time talking about that as well. We also have the C. It stands for control. There's all sorts of aspects of control. So calibration, being able to get the image perfectly accurate to industry standards for what's called BT 709, which is a fancy way of saying the colors used for non-HD content, and BT 2020, which is the color space used in the wider gamut that's used for HDR processing. So the ability to do that is very important, and be able to get what's also known as grayscale and gamma all perfectly where it should be, because this all impacts the colors and the contrast, and being able to delineate those fine details so they're not getting crushed in the blacks or the whites. So that's a big part of calibration, whether you're calibrate it yourself or whether you have an expert that you bring in to calibrate it. That's a big deal. Other things related to control, like IP control for working with things like Crestron or Control 4 or Savant. These types of systems are very important to be able to tie in for the integration, or even control for the dealer to be able, with the end user's permission, to be able to log in and test the system, check the system, and operate it, and configure the NV and the rest of the system just like they were in the same room together. It's very, very powerful and another unique feature of our product. So there's different aspects of control, even things like geometry control, being able to fix distortion, any wonky corners. We all have that corner that's not exactly straight with projection, and you can spend hours trying to get the alignment just perfect. We have ways to fix it digitally without introducing any artifacts or other such issues. And then you've got the HD part of the Music HD, which stands for your HDR tone mapping, and the detection of various aspect ratios, which also plays into the nonlinear strategy.
Yeah, so it's a pretty stout device there, but really cool looking, and definitely like a rack mounted kind of piece, typically in the types of installations you'd be sold into. Price point, you're about $15,995. Is that what it is?
Yeah, it's about $16,000 for the MV Extreme and $9,500 for the MV Pro.
Yeah, I saw a nice review where they said, hey, if you're comparing this to high-end audio, then it's a value. And think about what a couple of 2-channel speakers cost you. So don't get, you're not talking about your average consumer investing in this, but someone who's really putting a lot of investment into a home cinema. So this makes the video that much. I don't blink at prices anymore because of the CEDIA channel, the level of installs that we're talking about. But that just gives us sort of a framework of where we're at on that.
I was just gonna say, you're only as good as your weakest link, right? So you spend all this money, like even in my case, on the perfect lighting and the perfect chairs and the perfect screen and the perfect speakers and amplifiers and all this, and then to leave yourself short or to leave a customer short in video performance is just, it's a difficult thing, right? Because you're this close, right? Mm-hmm. You're one more piece of gear away from really being able to maximize the performance of the video, right? And you hit the nail on the head. I mean, this product is there's two big things that it delivers, and it depends on what hat you have on. But for like our dealers and integrators, the product delivers convenience, speed of installation, being able to, and flexibility in the system, and a tool that can fix all sorts of various issues and common customer complaints, right? Like, why do I have these black bars, or why is this corner not correct, or why is my HDR too dark, or these types of things. So being able to be up front rather than reactive, and we can add this product to solve it. Dealers now are speccing these in their jobs, so a lot of our customers are the type that they are not sure exactly what equipment they're getting until it's proposed by the dealer and dealer explains everything.
Mm-hmm.
And some of our customers are more the enthusiast type and purposely seek it out and get it for themselves or instruct their integrator, hey, can you add this, to the system?
And when you start working with a dealer, you said we talked before about you've got a training program that isn't too overly complicated. There's a process there. So what, about an hour and a half that kind of a ramp up there with a new dealer, or I remember that
Right.
correctly?
Yeah. So what we do is we have online remote training. One of the really cool things about the product, like I was mentioning before when we talked about control, is remote control.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time when a new dealer onboards, they have a training session with one of our leading product specialists and their team. Sometimes it's done in conjunction with their first install. So they'll schedule that and say, hey, we're going to install this product for the first time at a client next Thursday at 9 a.m. And we have one of our techs available that logs in to the MV and shows them around, helps them, guides them through the installation. It takes about an hour, hour and a half, depending on how deep they want to go or how many questions, that they have. And we guide them through, the process. It's actually very easy setup, but like anything, the first time you do it, you kind of, may have some questions of how do you best handle this, or how would you recommend setting up this? So a lot of the time is actually spent just going through your different source devices and display devices with our recommended settings that are good starting places and places to go from there. And the rest of it is pretty easy. And then once you have the MB configured how you want it, it's a very easy way to save those settings off to your laptop or to the cloud. And then when you do your next MB install, you can just instantly clone it to match what was on the other settings. So you can go into the field and set up your next one using our guide as a reference for things, or you can get back on, plan some time with our tech team, and they'll help you through it.
So remind us what tone mapping accomplishes, what that, how important that is to the processor.
Yeah, so HDR is a high dynamic range, right? In order to achieve this, there is the luminance, or I should say, the brightness range needs to be compressed because the content is mastered for an enormous amount of brightness that today's consumer displays just simply can't handle. So, for example, there's content that's mastered at 1,000 nits and 4,000 nits. And this is just a little techie term for levels of brightness, right? So something that's mastered for 4,000 nits means that there's 4,000 distinct levels of brightness that any of the content, on the screen at any time could be mapped to. Most projectors, in the $5,000 to $30,000 range, once properly set up and calibrated, depending on the screen size, are delivering somewhere between 70 or 80 nits to maybe 150 or 175 nits. When you get into higher end projectors like like a Barco Nord or Freya or a Sony GTZ 380, getting into that like $100,000 price point, you can get into that 200-300 nit, maybe up to 400 nits, but you're still not even close to even just 1,000 nits that some content's mastered at, or 4,000 nits, and certain contents even at 10,000 nits. And so, and the same thing with TVs. TVs are bright, but they might have a spec for, let's say, 800 nits or 1,000 nits, but in reality, for a specific area of the screen, they're generally not delivering anywhere near that level of brightness. And so the question is how you take content that is mastered to show a range of 4,000 nits and get it to fit into 100 nits or 150 nits. And the answer is not a linear curve, right? So you can't just say, well, we'll divide everything by 100 or everything by 250, right? Because that would look really bad, right? So tone mapping is essentially the art of remapping, let's say 4,000 nits, if it's a 4,000 nit content, into the available brightness that your display has. So how do you smartly compress, imagine a bucket, right? That's filled with 4,000 gallons of water, right? And now you have a container, your display, that's only capable of 100 and holding 150 gallons of water. In this case, gallons or nits is our analogy. How are you going to pour out 4,000 gallons into this 150 gallon container? Obviously, a lot is going to get wasted and spill all over the place. But what you get left in that 150 has got to be representative of the original. And that's the trick. So tone mapping is the art of figuring out where you can, slice and dice the content and put it back together in a way where you look at it, it looks great and it has the HDR and these kind of definitions, despite the display being relatively very limited in its brightness range.
So that gets,
Does that help?
yeah, and that gets you a long way toward just a better image in general when you're dealing with HDR specifically. And then if you're going back to one of the two original features, you've got the aspect ratio management, which maybe you can explain how that's accomplished so that you're not sitting there waiting for a mechanical process to go through if you've got that sort of a projector.
Sure.
Or if you're like me, go walk back and climb up and do it all mechanically.
Oh, that's great. Why don't we kind of step through a couple of these next slides to kind of show this is why we're here. This is the back of the ENVY. You can see this is your one input there on the right, and then your one output on the left. So remember we talked about that. And then, we've got space for like your RF antenna. And, you can see it's actually very simple. This is our RC2 backlit remote control that's gotten a lot of people talking, very excited about this. So this is like an example of mapping HDR, because remember I mentioned it's an art, right? So it's much as an art as it is a science. And what this means is that not every display does it to the same degree. And so what you see on the left side of the screen is an example of tone mapping without an ENVY, right? And this is I won't name names, but this is a very popular display manufacturer, and this is how it was looked. These are photographs off of the screen that were actually done with them in the best settings, with and without the ENVY. And you can just see like the level of detail. Like if you look at the green highlights in the beam in the bottom right quadrant image, you can kind of see the richness of the green there, and on the left side, how it just kind of goes flat, right? And all the detail that's lost. And so that's like an example of how our product, when you compare what the ENVY looks like to tone mapping done any other way, you see these kind of demonstrable differences. If we go to the next one, you can see this is like an example of the importance of proper tone mapping. This is actually used as a function we have called contrast recovery. So if you look in box 5, you can see how these highlights are just kind of getting blown out. And that results in this white crush, right? And you don't necessarily even realize it when you're watching it. But like, look at that same headlight in the section with ENVY. You see all the detail back, or like in box number 2, the top part where you can kind of see the Lego pieces and the street, how hazy it is compared to that section below it, right? So this is all about, getting those contrasts and details out. This is an example of highlight recovery, which is also another function of our dynamic tone mapping. So tone mapping has various functions that all kind of come together that kind of create this image. So you can just see the difference in clarity on the outside. Like, just look at one of the little sections at the top, of this dome, and all the detail in there compared to how that detail is kind of missing. And then, of course, in the middle, you can just see all the extra detail and clarity versus kind of that crush and that bloom that comes out. So this kind of wraps up the discussion on of tone mapping and the importance of getting it right. Because remember, we're looking at this on screens, not an HDR,
Sure.
and you can see how demonstrable these are. So imagine this, up on a 10-foot, 12-foot, 16-foot screen,
For sure.
and the differences these things make.
Yeah. So you're pointing out that there is a tone mapping occurring in other display devices. It's just not necessarily up to the quality of what you're providing.
Correct. There's no real set way to do it.
Okay.
And so we have our proprietary patent pending algorithms that use things like highlight recovery, contrast recovery, shadow detail recovery. And it's also not an exact science too, because, there's really no right and wrong because there's not enough brightness to really render the scene ideally how it's supposed to be rendered. So the question is, do you make it a little bit brighter and a little less saturated, or do you make it a little more saturated and a little less brighter? When in reality, the scene might supposed to be super bright and super saturated. None of these displays can achieve both at the same time. So we also have controls that let you as the end user pick, what's your preference?
Okay, good. Yeah, that really helps to get the visual representation and the A/B match up there. So that's great.
Yeah. So if you want to move on to the next one, I think they're now kind of getting to what you were just asking about as far as aspect ratios.
Yeah. So so you see the black bars in there, how you describe that, and you have the different options depending on what type of screen you have and what you want to fix.
Right. So in this, there's basically two different ways that we handle aspect ratios, and how we handle it is up to the integrator or the customer. We have what we call constant image height, is what we're looking at example here. So Jeremy, you mentioned that in your case you have a manual lens zoom that requires you to physically, turn the lens, right, to zoom in and out. And that obviously presents a challenge, right? Because when you're watching content that is scope, like what you see on the top box here, you have to zoom out until, normally this would look like an image with black bars on all four sides, right? And you zoom out until all those corners are touching. And that works until the content is 16:9 or a different aspect ratio, because in that same zoom position, that content now is going to be spilling off the top and the bottom of the screen. Like you mentioned, your daughter is like, "Hey, Dad, this is on the ceiling and on the wall. Like, can you come back down here?" And so that's a big part of it. And when you're using a manual zoom, it's extra challenging because you physically have to get your buns off the seat, and climbing up there. But it's equally, well, maybe not quite as challenging, but it's equally challenging, or I guess I should say annoying, when you have a motorized zoom, because you got to push the button on the remote and then you're waiting, right? And you're now at the scope size. And where you run into more challenges is when the aspect ratio is changing, right? So this is Interstellar. This is an example here where the aspect ratio changes in this movie back and forth in this scene probably 10 or 20 times, right? And so what the NV does is you zoom out once. Like it's like if you had an NV in your system, you would zoom out once and it would fill that screen. And then you will never, ever, ever touch that lens position again. And when the content is your full scope, it'll render it like that. And then when it does not fill the screen, it will automatically still fit it like you see here without it going off the top and the bottom. Okay. And that's what we consider constant image height. And then when the movie like this is going back and forth, When it goes to scope, you see it like this at the top.
Mhm.
When it goes back to like the IMAX scenes or 16:9, you see it like you see on the bottom.
Okay.
And it is seamless. Like it's just instantly back and forth. Like there's not like a half a second or even a single frame where it's behind. It's just, spontaneously boom
Yeah.
on each change.
Yeah, so that keeps the artistic intent of the director there, the creator of the film, and it also, in the case of the menus, you're not popping back and forth like the Apple menu in 16:9 and going to your your scope movie and having issues there where you can't see the menu when you come back. So
Right. Because that challenge is, and just so the audience, just to expand on that for a second, the challenge is, you go to the Apple TV menu, it's 16:9, right? You pick out your movie, it's a scope movie. Now you got to change the lens position and wait for that to happen, whether it's manual or with a button. And then you get into the movie, and whether you decide after a minute or two, oh, I already watched this movie, or you decide, hey, I don't want this, or at the end of the movie, you go back to the Apple TV menu. Now it's back on the ceiling and on the floor. You got to change the zoom again, right? So whether it's changing aspect because you're going between devices or menus, or because it's happening within the content itself, it's the same challenge.
Absolutely. Well, that's a good way to understand it there. So you're maintaining that the black bars, but they're not. The image is not bleeding off the screen as a result.
Right.
So, cool.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. And that just simplifies things for the integrator, because a lot of times the customers complain. So the integrators want to make it happen automatically.
Yeah.
And you can do that. The MV will tell your control system, hey, it just changed to 16:9. And then if you have a masking screen, or you can send the command to the projector, like, okay, go to zoom position 1. Right. And the MV says, oh, this is now scope, and it'll tell so you can still automate it, if you want, or, you could just use it like this and never touch the zoom again.
Right. Okay.
Most people are happy, both consumers and integrators, to rid themselves of that whole problem.
For sure. Okay. Nice.
Okay, so
I love this. You showed me this when we had a call before, and this is amazing how you've accomplished this.
Yeah, so nonlinear stretch, you mentioned director's intent. So we have a mix of customers and integrators. Some want to watch how they want to watch, and some want to watch how the director intended it to. But at the end of the day, when it comes to sports, there's really no argument for not using nonlinear stretch, we believe. It can create a much more immersive experience, right? And the thing we like to point out is our nonlinear stretch is special. A lot of people think about nonlinear stretch back from 20 years ago or 10 or even 5 years ago. Our nonlinear stretch uses a special patent pending approach. We're the first and only company to do what we call vertical compression, along with horizontal expansion, right? So if you think of a sponge, you have a sponge, you squeeze it in the middle, the sides naturally go out. And so we're actually compressing vertically, which gives us natural horizontal expansion. And then we add some horizontal expansion. And so it's just a long way of saying that we are creating that geometric distortion on both axes, vertically and horizontally, and makes it far less obvious, right? So if you take a look at the football player on the left, you can see up here that, the top image, he looks completely natural. Obviously, it's not stretched. But look at on the stretch image on the one below, looks completely natural, right? So you would have expected him to look 2 feet wide, especially back. And that's why we like to pick this particular image to show that difference. And because we're using, a patent pending technique to share that geometric distortion across both the vertical and the horizontal axis. And so it makes it look, very natural.
Yeah, you're basically only giving up a little bit of content on the top and bottom edges there that's not even important in this particular application. So through
Right. And that's all configurable, right?
Okay.
So we have some people that say, oh, but I can see that below you're taking off below the ticker, or you don't see as much of the crowd at the bottom. You can use the nonlinear stretch so that every single pixel is still rendered. This is just kind of how we prefer to set it up, because we like to get as big as we can on the relevant part of the game. So for example, sometimes there's like a sporting event and they have this ticker at the bottom, that's like 1.5 feet large, on a projection screen about like next week's boxing match scrolling by and sports. And I don't know about you, but I don't really like to see all that. I just want to see the game. So you can just go into the controls and really quickly, just click, 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 and zoom that right off. Right.
Nice.
And you can't even see it. And then it makes the whole image bigger and requires all the less amount of stretch to accomplish the same thing.
And this also is what essentially helps you with the subtitle management as well, sort of.
There's an aspect of nonlinear stretch with the subtitle management that we're happy to go over that next with you, because we kind of combine. I'll show you some tricky ways that we use nonlinear stretch with that as well.
Okay, yeah. How do we do that?
This is subtitle management. So this is a scope screen with a scope movie and subtitles. Okay. And so for those that are not familiar, when you have a projector zoomed out, like you're watching 16:9 content, this is what it looks like. So this is very normal, whether you have a subtitle there or not. And then when Jeremy gets his ladder and he goes up and he's changing the zoom, or whether we're doing this physically or with manual lens shift, what's happening is you're moving all the corners into the corners, right? So you're enlarging, it's getting bigger and bigger until it fills the entire screen. But then what happens? You can see your subtitles wind up on the wall, right? Yeah. Because everything moved and your subtitles are now on the masking and on the wall, which is really frustrating. And so what we do is the Envy instead will show the movie at full screen like this when there's no subtitles. And then if you go one more, we bring back just the black bar and put the subtitle in it. Okay, so if you think back, a little while ago, we saw all that black bar and you're watching it like a postage stamp. That's how you have to watch it without the Envy, because otherwise your subtitles are not going to be readable. And this way, you watch it throughout the movie, and then the subtitles, you can control how long you want that black bar to stay. So, for example, you could set it for 15 seconds or 3 minutes so that when there's dialogue, that black bar is there and the subtitles are coming and going in the black bar, because you wouldn't want the whole thing coming and going.
Right.
And likewise, if you had 2 lines of subtitles, 3 lines of subtitles on the top, subtitles on the bottom, all this works independently. So it'll make room for them on the top. It'll make room for 1 line, 2 lines, 3 lines, whatever you need. And then to your question about nonlinear stretch, it's actually a very interesting question, because if you look here, we are shrinking the image in order to come up with that black bar on the bottom. And by shrinking the image, we should therefore need to have black bars on the sides,
right?
But you notice there are none, okay, because we are subtly using nonlinear stretch to get rid of the sidebars. So we're shrinking the image down to make room for the black bar, which creates bars on the sides, which we then add on a little touch of nonlinear stretch to get rid of that, and so that it just fills your screen nicely for that.
That's great. Yeah, that works really well. So what have we not covered in the features?
Yeah, so probably the only main key feature that we haven't really talked about yet is motion AI and motion interpolation.
Okay.
Which has really kind of turned the video processing world upside down in the last couple of years. And in particular, it's something we've been working on for a long time.
Yeah, so this is where your average new TV, 4K TV consumers not sure which setting to have on for sports and movies, and if they don't switch it off, you end up with the dreaded soap opera effect. You hear about that a lot, especially when you're watching a cinematic movie, and it looks fine for sports, but man, it doesn't look good when you switch to a movie. It looks like
Right.
you're watching some weird video content. So
Yeah, it ruins it. So basically, let's talk for a moment about what motion interpolation is, why it exists
yeah,
in the first place. If it's so evil, why is it even here?
sure.
Right. So movies are filmed at 24 frames per second. Right. So that means that every 1/24th of a second, there's a new frame shown. And if you think about like, especially like video games today and things like everything's happening at like 120, 240, like 144, like it's all about high frame rate because it removes the motion blur and the judder. When we talk about judder, we talk about, like this shake.
Mhm.
But it is tricky because in the process of doing that, you lose the cinematic look that we're all accustomed to, right? So this happens because of something called sample and hold. We won't get too technical, but it's important for people to know that the reason this has become an issue in recent times is because older technology like film projectors, plasmas, CRTs, right? We're going back a ways now. They didn't suffer from these same types of motion artifacts because they work differently. The way those worked is they displayed the image 1/24th of a second and then it faded. Like in the case of CRT, it was painting, right?
Mhm.
And by the time it got to the bottom, the top was already fading and it was painting again. And so there was no persisted image, right? So there's something called sample and hold. All modern displays, whether you're talking about LED, OLED, LCD, all these types of displays, they use what's called sample and hold, which means the image is shown, held for 1/24th of a second, and then instantly the next one just appears. There is no break. Okay. And our eyes, the way that we see, we cannot process something that spontaneously changes, right? Like in real life, nothing works that way, right? I mean, and so when you have an image that's here and then suddenly it's here, right? So you've gone from here to here,
Mhm.
but there is none of this. It's just appears there. Our eyes blur that. Like the TV or the projector isn't really a blur, right? It's the fact that the way our eyes see that change, we can't comprehend how something jumped from spot A to spot B.
Mhm.
So we see it and perceive it as a blur to have it make sense to our brains. And so we didn't have these types of challenges back when we were dealing with film or plasma. And so manufacturers came out with motion interpolation to solve this. This is the idea of creating frames where there are none to make up more of them. So instead of 60 frames in a second, we've got, instead of 24, we now have 60 frames in 1 second. Okay, so you think about that analog clock that would move, that second hand that would kind of move around like in skips. We've all
Mhm.
seen those. And then you have the ones that just kind of swing around.
Mhm.
Okay, that's kind of like what we're talking about, that difference. But imagine if you could take a movie that had only 24 frames per second and insert, let's just call it for simplicity's sake, 2 frames in between each frame, redraw it in a way, well, if it really had 60, it would be, it went from here to here. If it really had 60, there would be something here and here, and actually recreate it.
Mhm.
Okay. But there's a problem with that in the execution. So the idea is solid, but the problem is that you wind up creating motion artifacts where there were none. Okay, which are distracting to the movie. Like, wait, what was that? Oh, that building is now shaking. Or, you see on the sky, on the thing, and the motorcycle, I believe this is from Skyfall. His face is disappearing as he rides.
Mm.
Or in this lady, you can see her foot, the way her leg is broken in pieces.
Mm.
Or like on the top right, there's creates like this halo around his head where the blinds are. Or those blinds in the bottom left, those are supposed to all be connected.
Mm.
And there's another example, halo around the lady's face. You can kind of see the profile, like where her nose is, go out to your left, and you'll see, kind of like the outline of her face. So these are things that distract us. So people are like, I don't like these distractions. I'm turning that off. The other thing you mentioned is soap opera effect. For those that are not familiar, this is it looking too real. It looks like you're on the set watching them film a movie instead of actually watching it through the camera, right? And so we set out to solve this. We are not the first to invent motion interpolation. We're just trying to be the first to perfect it.
Okay.
And we do that in two ways. We do that by trying to create less motion artifacts, so introducing less artifacts on our own to begin with in the process of solving this. And the second thing that we do is provide very, very fine-grained control on the amount of smoothness and soap opera effect. So you can add just a little bit and have it look fully cinematic and not even know that there's any motion interpolation running, but still getting benefit because things that were normally shaking like this might now shake like this. So it still has that motion blur and it still has that, cinematic feel, but it's more controlled. It's not an eyesore that it can be in some situations. Some people like everything really cranked up, right? Like, so most people, when you mention motion interpolation, they say, oh, you mean that thing that I turn off the second I get my TV, right? Because it ruins the image. And that's because it's on full strength or the implementations. But there's some people that may like it up that high, especially for certain things. So, for example, there's a lot of concerts that are filmed at 24 frames per second. You don't necessarily anticipate a concert to look cinematic.
Right.
You want to look like you're there and the performer's in front of you and they're dancing around the stage and they're moving and there's all sorts of effects going on. And it's just, when you see it on, the light bulb goes off and you're like, wow, this is how it's meant to be seen. And so depending on your personal preference for how strong you like it and the content, like for me personally, if I'm watching a concert or something like Planet Earth 2, more documentary or film based, I may want it stronger or at the strongest setting. And if I'm watching something more cinematic, or especially something classic like Lawrence of Arabia, I'm going to want to watch that in the lowest mode. And so it's sort of like a shower, right? Imagine if your shower only had cold, warm, and scorching hot, right? Like you would be miserable and you just wouldn't use that shower, right? Now imagine the shower with this variability, right? Where we can set that temperature exactly where we want it for the situation. That's what we're able to do with, Motion AI. And the other cool thing that we're doing is we're driving these displays now at 4K 120, which is new. A lot of people have these displays that can do 4K 120, but you're only watching at 24 or maybe 60. So in addition to taking 24 to 120, we're also taking 50 to 100. Even in the US, 50 is more popular. 50p is more popular, like in Europe. But in the US, there's certain shows like F1 Drive to Survive on Netflix is all 50p. So we take that to 100, and 60p content like sports, we take to 120. And certainly sports and things like that can't be smooth enough for people, right? So you don't run into the same, oh, it doesn't have that cinematic look. There is none to begin with. So being able to watch sports at 4K 120 instead of 4K 60 is a big deal as well. So there's a lot of really neat things that are happening in the world of motion AI, and it's been very well received in the last year since we've been rolling it out.
Well, I think that we've covered a lot of ground here. I think we've hit the main points, and the visual for those who are watching on YouTube are going to be really helpful. But the in-person demo is going to be really the place to go. For those who haven't seen this in action. I saw your release that you've got a dealer in the Midwest who's doing what you said, a MadVR Labs Experience Center. Ascend, I guess, is their name, the integrator.
Yes. So what's really special about this experience center is that it will be perhaps the only place in the world where you can experience multiple high-end gear in one theater, right? So, for example, there's plenty of places you can go and experience, let's say, a Storm ISP processor or a Trinov, processor, but we're not sure there's any where you could experience either in the same room, right? So here you can experience both in the same room, even with like Trinov's new waveforming. So being able to experience it, it's not some people think of it as like a sales showroom, but that's not the purpose, right? The purpose is literally an experience center for the manufacturers, the integrators. The manufacturers will hold, trainings there with their dealers. Enthusiasts can come out for events. So it's really a multiple purpose event, especially being able to do things like testing, right? So you have a particular AVR and a particular display that may be having, some sort of communication issues. It may be difficult to get this equipment all in the same room. In this case, they can come in, do testing, or we'll run testing on their behalf. So it's really something for the whole industry to enjoy, from all the way from the enthusiasts all the way up to the manufacturers.
That's really cool. And it's in Olathe, Kansas, which is the Kansas City, Kansas area.
It's actually a little bit west. So it's
okay.
actually, but it's very close into that area. Yep.
And available, really open this summer, it looks like. So
right. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's great to know about. And we'll definitely see you again this fall at CEDIA EXPO. And I'm sure a lot of folks will be there as well. I'm looking forward to another great demo in person.
Yeah, and a lot of cool things up on our website. If you go to www.madvrnv.com, there's a resource section that has all sorts of links to articles, white papers, guides, setup guides, how-to guides, and on our YouTube channel there are demonstrations from CEDIA ISE to see like all these features in action and how they all work together. So that's a great resource for anybody that wants to learn more.
Yeah, just on your LinkedIn page alone, you've got a ton of videos and conversations there. So it's really, you can dive in and get lost on a lot of interesting stuff there. So encourage folks to check that out. Well, Rick, thanks so much for your time today. It's been fun, and I've learned a lot, and it's a great technology.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Jeremy. It's a lot of fun. Anytime. This is a blast.
Richard Litofsky is co-founder and CEO of MadVR Labs, the developer of the MV Extreme and MV Pro video processors for the high-end home cinema market. And like he said, you can learn more about these technologies at madvrnv.com. And that wraps up today's show, which was produced by Residential Tech Today, IPW, and Pretty Easy Podcasts. You can check out prettyeasypodcast.com if you want professional and affordable production help on your own podcast. And if you're new to Residential Tech Talks, please subscribe to the podcast wherever you watched or listened to this episode. Also, check out all the latest residential tech news at our magazine's website, restechtoday.com, where you can also subscribe to the print or digital magazine and to our Tuesday and Thursday email newsletters. Until next time, please stay safe, stay inspired, and let us know if you have a great story to tell.
Residential Tech Talk, lighting specialist, residential tech.